Welcome once again to this one-hour special with the superintendents for Dade and Broward County. In the political climate surrounding education, one phrase is often used by politicians to justify their policies, and that phrase is parental rights. But what exactly does that mean? Before we get into that discussion with the superintendents, I pose that question to the presidents of the PTAs in Dade and Broward, Maria Norton and Sharon Pazlowski.
Always in the district, our parents have had a choice. If you didn't want your kid to read a certain book, you could just write a note and say, I don't want my kid to read that book. Or if it was sex education, you have to sign consent forms to have your child in those classes. The parents have always had the right to dictate their own child's education, right? Or to steer what they wanted their children to learn. And now, instead of one parent speaking for their own child, you've got a parent maybe speaking for every child in a classroom or every child in a school building.
Well, Maria, the question almost becomes, you know, should one parent's right to object to something for their child then be able to be used to object to it for all children, which is what we're seeing with a lot of issues as it relates to what books are allowed to be in libraries or in classrooms. And as a result, one parent can end up having an impact on all of the other children's. And what about their parents' rights?
Correct, yes. I mean, we as PTA have been the #1 advocate for parents' rights. We've been speaking about parental rights. That's why it says potential to involve families and communities. So the way they've moved this parental rights is exactly that. So I think it's really not parental rights. It's parental rights of whoever speaks louder, as opposed to who does it really benefit.
Definitely right now, in these areas, it is definitely the loudest voices, but it's not necessarily the majority of voices, right? And we're being drowned out by loud voices instead of numbers.
You know, how challenging, how confusing is it to be a parent right now in Florida? Sharon, talk about that.
I'm glad my children are in high school or in college. Like, that's how I feel about it. And even, the colleges too are under this, as we go into secondary education, there's a lot of politics now, even in our secondary education, where kids are going to learn new things and new ideas and have new doors opened for them, right? And now there's politics even there.
So we have really scary times that it's almost like we're playing Russian roulette with our kids' education, it seems like.
I feel like they're going to get worse before they get better. I feel that is the political climate right now. And I'm hoping, that it sounds selfish, but I'm actually hoping my own children finish before they're, what's the word? Stifled. I feel like that's what we're doing to a whole, from kindergarten all the way through secondary education. Now we're stifling kids and their growth potential and their ability to read the world. The world's getting smaller. And instead of making education the window, we're shutting it and keeping our kids small. I don't think that's the right way to go. Okay,
let's talk about another issue that gets a lot of attention and maybe an inordinate amount of attention, but the question with regard to books in school libraries. We're doing this interview in a school library. There was an incident at Bob Graham Learning Center, which is a K-8. They are a parent who had 2 children in the school, filed a complaint against a series of books, including Amanda Gorman's book, The Hill We Climb. Those books were removed for a brief period of time to go through a review process. It was then determined that the books, the Amanda Gorman book, could go back in, but only for middle school and up. We're no longer eligible for elementary school. I guess I want to first get, because you're dealing with this in Broward as well. Talk to me about how you approach this issue that we're now seeing more and more parents filing complaints, and even some non-parents filing complaints against books that they may or may not have even read. How are you dealing with that in Broward?
So prior to me, there's a process, and as I've already indicated earlier, there's going to be an additional step where we look at things and we review them. Are there materials out there that's not appropriate for children in places they can have access to? Certainly. You know, where we're finding a bigger problem of it is online. You know, we're worrying about just media centers, and yes, that's always a concern, but you've got to think about the access that children have online and what they have at home and what's free to them to get to. So we also have to not only protect making sure everything is age appropriate inside our media centers, but we also have to make sure that they're not reaching out into resources that we're not approving of that are inappropriate for children, because there are age appropriate things that just should not be seen, and especially when you have a K-8 or a 6-12. You know, 6th grader is not the same as a 12th grader, and a 1st grader is not the same as a 6th grader. So it is a balancing act a little bit more. There's a lot more attention. Yes, that's one of the new facets of being an educator. We have to really pay attention to these things. And it's okay if someone's looking at what we're serving up for our children at certain ages, we should be monitoring it and making sure it's appropriate.
So I need to correct one of the part of the statement. So the book was moved to the intermediate side of the library, because that is the complexity of a K-8, right? You're typically elementary, middle, and high. When you have a K-8, you have different levels of material. The book was moved to the intermediate level. It was not eliminated from access from elementary students. And there was a letter sent to parents that clearly delineated that. I just want to put that for the record. And so in Dade, you know, we're learning through all of this. As this landscape continues to shift, we have to learn. So what we're doing in Dade is being very crystal clear that when there is a parental objection to a book, the new policy that will come into play, very specific. You just cannot object to a book in general. You have to be specific. What page number? What in particular are you objecting to?
Can a 4th or 5th grader check out and read The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman?
Yes, sir.
So they can go into the library and get the book. So what's the point of moving it from one part of the library to a different part of the library?
That's because they felt, this is it, the team that got together, they felt that the book was more appropriate for the intermediate grades, the higher grades, than they were for the elementary. That's what the committee of the teachers and the media specialists, that's what that committee decided to do.
But so then what's the net effect of it? If a 4th or 5th grader wants to read that book, they still can.
Yes.
So then I don't understand what was accomplished by moving the book to the intermediate section.
Again, K-8s are pretty interesting. It's an interesting setup. You have elementary books and you have middle intermediate groups books. This book came to light. That committee made a decision. They made a decision.
The committee, actually what the committee said was that they decided that they erred, this is their quote, erred on the side of caution in deciding to limit student access to the book. Erred on the side of caution. And I think in that phrase is the fear of a lot of people that when you start down a path of removing books or reshuffling where books will be, to err on the side of caution, because one parent who admitted later she didn't fully read the books, she may have written some things down, she didn't understand who the author was, she had postings that she put up that were anti-Semitic, that she posted stuff about the Proud Boys, that one parent could cause this controversy over this book scares a lot of parents sitting out there, because while the district finally allows the book in the library, erred on the side of caution, that phrase scares a lot of people.
The committee also recognized the incredible value, historical value, and educational value that the book had. They also recognized that. The book is available for other grade levels. They just placed it in the middle school section. What we have done, again, I said earlier before, we've added additional steps so that there is clarity in the objection and there is transparency in terms of what a committee will do and how books will be analyzed. I go back to this statement again. You object to a book, what pages, what content, what paragraphs. So the committee takes a look. So we are fine-tuning the process of objections for your particular reason, right? So that if we review a book that is objected to, that we are reviewing the nature of it, and we are very consistent in decisions that we're making.
So the phrase erred on the side of caution, that doesn't send a chill up your spine a little bit?
That's a statement we've been making as educators all our life.
Erred on the side of caution.
You'll always err on the side of caution with children. We're talking hundreds of thousands of children, and we're responsible. And when parents drop them off to our schools, we're going to make sure they're as safe as possible, and we're going to err on the side of caution when it's something we can't determine left or right. We just stay right down the middle and say what's best for the child.
Up next, we talk about the impact COVID had on education. Stay with us.
Yes News Miami, presented locally by Goya.
Welcome back. We are now almost 2 years from the worst of the pandemic, but students are still struggling to make up the ground they lost while schools were shut down. I asked both superintendents what they were doing to close that gap.
This is one of the topics that worries me the most. I know the other ones are important, but this worries me the most because the very first day I became a teacher at John F. Kennedy Middle in Riviera Beach, we talked about closing the achievement gap to 0. And we were pushing hard, we were making some great gains, and then COVID comes along. Well, obviously it impacted our poorest students. Some of them are our most fragile students, especially our ESE students, our ELL students, whereas some students who had resources were able to carry on because of being able to work in pods or get tutors and such. And man, all that work seemed like we almost lost it all. Which even puts more pressure. It was great. We got a lot of resource money from the government to make sure we did all these learning modules and these tutorings and stuff, but there's a lot of work to make up. We have lost some time, but you know where else we lost it? We lost it socially. One of the biggest parts of school is sitting down in the lunchroom with your best friends, or going to PE, or being able to walk along a straight line with your friends as you walk into the next class, music class or art class. And man, they've lost some of that. They spend too much time on electronic devices, and you don't learn social really face to face. So that's one of the things we're also dealing with, behaviors, and not bad behaviors, just behaviors that don't really line with social standards about going to school or being in groups or how to address people or how to say sir and ma'am and thank you and please. Those things that are very important in the big world. So that hurt too, because you're also developing a child socially when they come to school and with their peers, and they lost out on that. So we're finding that our fifth graders who really missed entire middle school, when you think about it, our ninth graders now almost missed all of their middle school in reality, fourth graders. So we're having to catch that up too, and that's a little extra work as well. But that
so
gap,
educationally, how do you make it up? I mean, is it different lesson plans? Is it more class? Is it extra? What is it? How do you do that?
It's all of those, but it's almost the same answer we gave you 8 minutes ago. Sticking to the standards and teaching what is important. Make sure that when they're tested on things they know about, and we can get them to that ultimate prize of graduating high school. It doesn't mean their life educationally is over, but that's our prize, and we have to stay focused on that. So resources, tutoring, counseling, everything we can do, but there's only so many people that can do that. So we're having to reach out into the community. We're using Education Foundation and our groups, anyone we can find that'll help teachers. And he may have some more to it because he's the experienced guy in the room. So.
Talk to me about it.
No,
how have you been doing it? Yeah.
All that I can add to Superintendent Licata's comment is, we have new standards and we have a new assessment process, which are more data points throughout the year. I think this will facilitate the response to teaching that we might have not had prior. Mm-hmm. So we're in the process right now are taking a deep dive, a careful look at our interventions, because interventions become very important because of this loss, particularly in some of the students, right? The underserved. We have to be really careful with that. And narrowing that achievement gap becomes incredibly important. It's all about making sure that we eliminate opportunity gaps for our students. And one thing that we are really trying to look at is elevating the importance of proficiency in reading and proficiency in mathematics. Not necessarily only a year's worth of growth, but really that proficiency target. And so we are honing in on looking at that now, especially for our youngest students, but there's a heavy focus, at least in Dade, on third grade. Why? Third grade is a benchmark. It's a gatekeeper to being fluent in reading and not being retained. Retention does not serve students well. And so we are taking a very careful look at those early grades to set the foundation.
What lessons did you learn that may apply going forward that instruct you in terms of school closures, those sorts of issues? Should there be another pandemic, another issue that arises, some new version of a disease out there? What did we take away? Was it a mistake to close schools? Should we keep them open? Pete, I'm going to start with you. What's the lesson out of COVID?
Well, the lesson I learned personally is don't take anything for granted. Once we closed schools, and that was a decision far beyond any of us, I think, we realized that we had to go out. And I served in schools, and I'm sure you did, where we were serving lunch to people that weren't going to eat lunch. Those children weren't going to eat breakfast or lunch unless we stood in line and handed as they came through the car lines. That is, if that doesn't refocus you on the importance of what we do now that we provide free lunch and breakfast, and so does Dade, for every child, that is a huge piece. These children don't have access to a lot, many of them, so you can't take anything for granted. When that child walks through the door, we have to give them every service, and we don't ever want to look back and say, I should have. Because I learned from COVID, we learned what the difficulties it provided and then the gap that it increased. I should have. No, we've learned from it, and we need to move forward because you never know when it's around the corner. And don't take anything for granted.
Should schools have been closed the way they were?
I don't know that question. I think because not many of us knew what was going on. I think you always err on the side of caution with children.
What did I learn? The sooner you open up, the better the students are off. Okay, students need to be in communication with teachers, just like Peter referenced. It's not only about academics anymore. It's about academics, and it's about the entire child, so that we don't lose ground. To me, the lesson learned is, if we ever go through this again, and God, hopefully we will not, is the sooner we bring back children in the healthiest of ways possible is the most beneficial for their learning and for their social skills, period. We saw children coming back, especially in middle school, that it was almost like reteaching the behavior of coming back and reintegrating into school, completely disconnected, back into their devices. So that's the one lesson that I believe I learned. The earlier you bring back the connection between students and their friends and their colleagues and the teachers, the better off everyone is.
Up next, what advice do these superintendents have for each other? That's coming up. All right, now let's get to the real part, which is when you have lunch, what's going to end up happening is, what advice are you going to give them in terms of how to manage a school board? Because that's the real trick for superintendents, isn't it? How do you manage your school board? So what advice do you have for him in terms of managing, 9 politicians who are your bosses?
So based on what I know of him, it's the skill set of listening, dialoguing, and communicating, and making sure that we're all working now more than ever as one. Sometimes you're going to differ on opinions, and you have to have the ability to explain why or why not, but most of the time you get to good places. You have to be able to develop relationships with each of your board members individually and then as a collective, because you have a group voice and then you have individual voices based on their constituents and their districts. And to me, listening and communicating in the most honest way possible, okay, is critically important in your ability to be successful with this.
He's smiling the entire time. Yeah. Go ahead.
I wonder why.
Look, I've always said catastrophic decisions are made in isolation. I'm going to pick up the phone and call him. I'm going to call a bunch of folks. I'm going to call Bill Monfort. I'm going to call folks. But he said something in there that it can't be, and I had to do it my first night and my first meeting with 9 members of the board. You have to give them the best information and do it in an honest fashion to say, this isn't going to work, or this isn't maybe the best for kids, or this, we can't afford to do this quite yet, but give me some time to work on it. And it's sincere. They saw me and they looked at me and said, okay, we're going to give you some time. And they challenged me but they give me the time to go ahead and do it. This isn't an easy position. It's not something that you just wake up and do, but it's a position that both of us want to be in, and we've asked to be there, and that's key. And our success is not built on independent thinking and not working out and reaching out to other people and getting their ideas and stealing from them. I'm a thief when it comes to great ideas. I'll take it all day to the bank if it works. But he was right about having an open and honest individual relationship. But most importantly, when you're up there and you're on TV and there's 9 folks talking about something that might be a little controversial, a little difficult, you give them the best information in an honest way and let them work through it, because they gave me that opportunity when I said I didn't have enough time, and they gave me that. So I respect that from the start, and I'm not going to change that process, because I think it helped them make decisions too.
Are you both ready to be fired if it comes to it, on something you believe in?
That's always a possibility. These positions that we're in are not permanent in nature, right? It's a difficult job. We're dealing with navigating a lot of different type of landscapes. But I know both of us are in it for the students.
That's right.
We're in it for the teachers, for the profession, that I have every hope that we will amplify the talent pool. In Dade, 51 of our schools are opening up teaching academies. That's how much we believe in the profession. That's how much we believe in the ability to attract talent. And so I'm here to do what's right for kids, period.
You've only been in the job a few weeks, and I'm already discussing you getting fired. So, but the reality is, more times than not, the tenure of a school superintendent doesn't end with parades and a lot of celebrations and cake. It tends to end in acrimony and contracts and lawyers and angry school boards. So you still want this job?
Yeah, no one forced me to apply for it, and I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it. The car windshield is far larger than the rear view mirror. So you just keep looking forward through it, and every once in a while checking the back. But at the end of the day, I know I can make a difference. I know if I stay on the kids' side and support teachers, things are going to work out. And I'll never waver. I'll never negotiate my value system for children, never. And I've said that from the start. I've said it from every interview I've done. And I'm not going to change that now, because I am who I am, and I still have to face my wife and my children and my grandchildren. When they look at me, they know I'm doing the right thing by kids.
I really appreciate you both doing this. I think this was important. I think it is a critical time in education, and I'd love to, maybe in a year or so, come back and we do it again. You'll host us in Broward?
Sure.
We'll come up to Broward?
Can you bring hard questions next time, though? I mean, these were easy meatballs. I mean, come on.
We'll be right back after the break.